Welcome to Duo Reads, where we decode deep ideas and break down big books one page at a time. Today, we're exploring, well, a true classic, a book that's resonated with millions globally and gives just an incredible perspective on humanity's capacity to endure and to find purpose, even in the most unimaginable circumstances. It's Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. Now, you might know it as this chilling yet profoundly inspirational story of his time as a prisoner in Nazi concentration camps, but it's also hailed as one of the outstanding contributions to psychological thought in the last 50 years. That was Carl Rogers who said that. So what exactly makes this such a monumental work, and what enduring lessons can it, offer us about ourselves?
Well, what's truly fascinating here is that Dr. Frankl, he was a psychiatrist by profession. He didn't just write about these concepts from, a distance. He lived them. He endured 3 years in Auschwitz, Dachau, and other camps. He tragically lost nearly his entire family there. But his ordeal didn't break him. It actually profoundly shaped his understanding of survival psychology. He asserts that this will to meaning isn't just a motivation, it's the primary motivation for human life. So this isn't just, a historical account. It's a profound exploration of the human spirit under the most extreme pressure imaginable. And it introduces his groundbreaking therapeutic approach, logotherapy.
That's incredible. I mean, he experienced the absolute worst of humanity, yet found a path to meaning and developed an entirely new psychological framework from it. How does he even begin to share such a deeply personal yet universally profound story?
Well, he deliberately focuses on what he calls the inside story. Frankl makes it really clear this isn't a typical account of the great horrors. He notes those have been described often enough, though, he adds, less often believed. Instead, he wants to show us the multitude of small torments and how everyday life in a concentration camp was reflected in the mind of the average prisoner. He was number 119,144. He wasn't a doctor there with special privileges, not initially anyway. He was a common laborer, digging and laying railway tracks. He gives us the perspective of someone truly stripped bare.
Right, so he puts us right there as one of the numbers. That really raises an important question then. How does a human mind initially react to that, to such an utterly dehumanizing environment?
Frankl identifies 3 distinct psychological phases. The first one is just pure shock. He describes the suffocating train journey, 80 people crammed into each coach, that uncanny sound of the engine's whistle. And then that chilling, unforgettable cry, Auschwitz. He talks about the delusion of reprieve, that desperate, almost irrational hope that it wouldn't be so bad, maybe they'd just be relocated for labor, Then came the infamous finger game, the selection by the SS officer, where a chilling 90% of his transport were sent to their immediate deaths in the crematorium, which, with this cruel irony, had Bath written over its door.
Oh, that chilling simplicity.
Yeah.
A single gesture determining life or death. It's such a stark reminder of humanity's capacity for, both unimaginable cruelty and that unexpected resilience. He recounts a moment that really encapsulates this stripping away of identity, being told to give up his manuscript, his life's work, and an older prisoner just scoffed, shit. It was in that moment he realized everything was taken away, literally down to naked existence. This sounds like the ultimate loss. But what happened next, psychologically?
Well, the second phase is characterized by this profound apathy, a kind of emotional death that served as a necessary protective shell. He observed prisoners, himself included, becoming desensitized to constant beatings, the sight of dying comrades, even, trading dead men's possessions. Imagine watching unmoved as a doctor picked off the black, gangrenous stumps from a 12-year-old boy's frostbitten toes.
Oh my God.
Or calmly sipping soup as a corpse you had just spoken to was dragged past, staring at you with glazed eyes from outside the hut window. It's a really stark portrayal of the mind's extreme defense mechanisms.
And yet, even in that state of deep apathy, in that landscape of suffering, there were flickers of humanity, moments of profound internal richness. What small joys or comforts did prisoners manage to find?
Remarkably, yes. Despite the extreme physical and mental deprivation, spiritual life could actually deepen. Frankl describes prisoners retreating into these inner riches and spiritual freedom. He shares some really powerful anecdotes, remembering his wife's image during a grueling march, feeling her presence beyond physical reality. He had this profound understanding that love is the ultimate and highest goal to which man can aspire, and that the salvation of man is through love and in love. Even amidst the horror, he experienced the profound beauty of nature. A sunset over the Salzburg Mountains, a tiny bird perching in front of him.
Wow.
And there was even art, improvised cabarets, a prisoner singing Italian arias for extra soup with peas. And he mentions a desperately sad tango played on a violin on his wife's birthday.
It's almost unimaginable to think about humor in such dire circumstances. Did Frankl observe any of that? What role did humor play?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, he identified humor as a soul's weapon for self-preservation, a crucial one. He describes training a friend to invent amusing stories about liberation, like imagining a surgeon forgetting camp habits and shouting, "Action, action," in an operating room.
Right.
This speaks to what he called the relativity of suffering. A trifling thing could cause the greatest joy, the transport not going to Mauthausen, which was a notorious extermination camp, but only to Dachau, where at least there weren't gas chambers at that time. They even envied convicts for their well-regulated, secure, and happy life.
Really? Convicts?
Yeah, and factory workers for their sheltered jobs. It's all about finding relative luck, a tiny sliver of hope in these unimaginable circumstances.
So what does this all mean for us then? Frankl's crucial insight from these experiences, it seems to be that even when everything external is taken away, there's one thing that cannot be seized.
Indeed, that's the core. He states that everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms. To choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. He saw comrades who behaved like swine and others who behaved like saints, proving that man has both potentialities within himself, which one is actualized depends on decisions but not on conditions. No. This spiritual freedom is what makes life meaningful, even in suffering. It's about finding your why. He even cites Dostoevsky, "There is only one thing that I dread, not to be worthy of my sufferings."
That incredible resilience, that core human freedom to choose our attitude, it's this profound understanding, forged in the depths of unimaginable suffering, that became the very bedrock of his therapeutic approach. Logotherapy. Can you walk us through what logotherapy is? How does it really stand apart from other psychological approaches we might be more familiar with, like Freud's or Adler's?
Sure. Logotherapy, which Frankl actually termed the third Viennese school of psychotherapy, is fundamentally a meaning-centered psychotherapy. So, while Freudian psychology famously emphasized the pleasure principle and Adler focused on the will to power, Frankl introduces this distinct third force, the will to meaning. He saw this as the primary motivational drive in humans. It's less retrospective, less introspective, not looking back so much at past traumas or internal drives. Instead, it focuses on the future and the meanings waiting to be fulfilled by the individual. He points to studies showing that a vast majority of people, whether in France or among Johns Hopkins students he mentions, identify finding a purpose and meaning to my life as their number one goal. It's a core human need.
Okay, so if this will to meaning is frustrated, if someone feels a profound lack of purpose or direction, what are the real-world implications Frankl observed? What happens then?
Well, he saw this manifest as what he termed existential frustration, which in severe cases could even lead to neurogenic neuroses. Think of it as this kind of deep unease or anxiety that arises not from past trauma or, say, chemical imbalance, but purely from a profound sense of aimlessness, a lack of purpose in life.
Right, a spiritual or existential issue.
Exactly. And he argues that suffering isn't always pathological. Sometimes it can actually be a human achievement, especially when it arises from this existential frustration. This highlights his point that a certain degree of tension, that gap between what one is and what one should become, is actually essential for mental health. His guiding motto, quoting Nietzsche, is so powerful. He who has a why to live for can bear almost anyhow. And he lived it. Having lost his manuscript in Auschwitz, he was driven to reconstruct it. That purpose, he felt, helped him survive typhus.
That idea of an existential vacuum, it seems incredibly relevant today, doesn't it? How does he describe this widespread issue?
Yeah, it really does. He describes it as a pervasive phenomenon, often hidden, where people have enough to live by but nothing to live for. It manifests as profound boredom, what he called Sunday neurosis, that feeling of emptiness and lack of direction, especially when the demands of the work week fade away.
The weekend emptiness.
Exactly. And this existential vacuum contributes significantly to widespread issues like depression, aggression, addiction. He shares an experience from his early career, unemployment neuroses. Patients equated joblessness with uselessness, with a meaningless life. He helped them by encouraging unpaid but meaningful activity, volunteering, pursuing a passion, and their depression lifted, even without a change in their economic situation. It showed him that meaning truly is the antidote.
So if meaning is so vital, how does Frankl suggest we actually find it in our lives? Where do we look?
He identifies three primary avenues. The first, pretty straightforwardly, is through creative work. We're doing a deed. This is about actively contributing, building something, creating something, making your mark. The second is by experiencing something or encountering someone. This could be goodness, truth, beauty, appreciating nature, culture, and most importantly, through love. He explains that love allows us to grasp another person's innermost core, and in doing so, enables them to actualize their unique potential. It's about truly seeing and valuing another person.
And the third way of finding meaning, that one's particularly powerful, isn't it? Especially considering his own harrowing experiences.
Precisely. It's by the attitude we take toward unavoidable suffering. When we cannot change a situation like, say, an incurable illness, we are challenged to change ourselves, our perspective. He recounts a really moving example of a general practitioner who's deeply depressed after his wife's death. Frankl helped him by simply asking, what would have happened? What would have happened if you had died first? And the doctor realized, suddenly, that he had spared her that immense suffering. This shift in perspective brought him solace, a meaning to his own grief. Frankl stresses that suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning, like sacrifice. But he clarifies, very importantly, unnecessary suffering is just masochistic. It's not heroic. Meaning is possible in spite of suffering, but only provided that suffering is unavoidable.
He also touches on this idea of a super meaning, which sounds incredibly profound, almost spiritual. What does he mean by that?
It is profound. It's the idea that ultimate meaning often exceeds our finite intellectual capacities. We can't always grasp it rationally. We have to bear our incapacity to grasp its unconditional meaningfulness in rational terms. Sometimes you just have to trust. He tells the story of a rabbi who lost his entire family in Auschwitz. His second wife was sterile, and he was struggling deeply, understandably, with the meaning of his survival. Frankl guided him to consider that perhaps his survival was for purification, maybe to become worthy of joining his innocent children in heaven someday. He connected it to the psalm, "Thou hast kept count of my tossings, put thou my tears in thy bottle."
Wow.
This new perspective, embracing a meaning beyond full comprehension, brought the rabbi profound relief.
So life's transitoriness, the fact that our time is limited, that isn't necessarily a bad thing in his view. It actually has meaning.
Not at all. He flips it. He says the only truly transitory aspects of life are potentialities, things we could do. Once actualized, once we do something or experience something or love someone, those moments are irrevocably stored in the past. They become part of our permanent record, so to speak.
Okay.
This makes us profoundly responsible for our choices, for how we fill our time. He uses this great analogy of a calendar. A pessimist sees the stack thinning daily, but an activist files each leaf away with pride, noting deeds done, loves loved, and importantly, sufferings bravely suffered. Old people, he argues, shouldn't be pitied for their past, but actually envied for their realities in the past, this treasure trove of actualized meaning.
And he developed practical techniques based on these ideas, techniques that sound almost counterintuitive, like paradoxical intention. Tell me about that.
He certainly did. Paradoxical intention is a really interesting one. It's based on two observations. First, that fear often brings about the very thing we're afraid of. Anticipatory anxiety. And second, that trying too hard, or hyperintention, often makes desired outcomes impossible, like trying too hard to fall asleep.
Yeah, that never works.
Exactly. So he advises patients to actually intend what they fear, to try and make it happen almost humorously. He cites these fascinating cases. A doctor, terrified of sweating in public, told to try and pour at least 10 quarts whenever he met someone. He couldn't do it, and the fear subsided. A bookkeeper with severe writer's cramp was told to deliberately scribble the worst possible scrawl. He found he couldn't, and the cramp eased. A stutterer who decided to try and stutter worse to gain sympathy found he couldn't stutter on demand. It leverages our uniquely human capacity for self-detachment inherent in a sense of humor to break that vicious cycle of anxiety. It's quite clever, really.
He also argues quite strongly against what he calls pan-determinism. You mentioned this earlier. It's a critique of views that see us as merely products of our environment, right? Can you define that a bit more clearly?
Absolutely. Pan-determinism is basically the belief that everything about us, our thoughts, choices, actions, is entirely predetermined by our genes, our upbringing, our past traumas, our circumstances, you name it. No real freedom.
Okay.
Frankl fundamentally challenges this. He argues that man is not fully conditioned and determined, but rather ultimately self-determining. We possess this profound freedom to take a stand toward our conditions, no matter how dire they might be. He, as a professor of neurology and psychiatry and a concentration camp survivor, bears witness to the unexpected extent to which man is capable of defying and braving even the worst conditions conceivable. He famously cites the case of Dr. J, a man known as the mass murderer of Steinhoff's psychiatric hospital. Years later, at a different prison, this same man became the best comrade you can imagine.
Wow, what a transformation.
It shows the radical unpredictability, the potential within the individual human spirit. Freedom, Frankl says, is only half the story. The other half is responsibleness, responsibility. He even playfully suggests that the Statue of Liberty on the East Coast should be supplemented by a Statue of Responsibility on the West Coast.
So his psychiatric credo, his whole approach, is deeply rooted in this belief in human dignity and freedom, even in the face of immense suffering or severe mental illness. It sounds like a truly humanized approach to psychiatry.
It is, profoundly so. He believed the innermost core of the patient's personality is not even touched by a psychosis. Even an incurably psychotic individual, he argued, may lose his usefulness, but yet retain the dignity of a human being. He really advocated for a humanized psychiatry that sees the unique human being behind the disease rather than reducing them to just a damaged brain machine.
That's so important.
Yeah. And he directly challenges Freud's assertion that hunger, for example, would blur all individual differences and reduce people to a primal state. In the concentration camps, Frankl observed the exact opposite. People became more different. People unmasked themselves, both the swine and the saints. He highlights powerful examples like Father Maximilian Kolbe, who was later canonized after being murdered in Auschwitz because he volunteered to die in place of another prisoner.
And this all ties together into his powerful idea of tragic optimism. This isn't about ignoring suffering, is it? It sounds like something much deeper.
Precisely. It's not about rose-tinted glasses at all. Tragic optimism means remaining profoundly optimistic in spite of the tragic triad, as he calls it, of pain, guilt, and death. These unavoidable parts of life, it's about finding the potential within them, turning suffering into a human achievement, deriving from guilt the opportunity to change oneself for the better, and deriving from life's transitoriness an incentive to take responsible action. It flips these perceived negatives into opportunities for growth, for meaning. Happiness, like success, he says, cannot be pursued directly. It must ensue as a byproduct of fulfilling a meaning. And he leaves us with this truly powerful, almost chilling concluding statement. Since Auschwitz, we know what man is capable of. And since Hiroshima, we know what is at stake. It's a profound call to understand the depths of human nature, our capacity for both incredible good and horrific evil, and our individual responsibility in shaping our own meaning and perhaps the world around us.
Wow, what an incredible journey through man's search for meaning. It's just so clear that Frankl's insights aren't just for extreme situations, are they? They're for every moment of our lives. He reminds us that even when external circumstances feel beyond our control, our inner freedom, our freedom to choose our attitude and find meaning that always remains. So maybe as you go about your day, just consider this. What meaning is life asking you to fulfill right now?